and you are fixing a mistake that you have made at this point. Nobody picks up 17.
Just our initial commentary on our topic today, which is volume versus intensity, and really just understanding the difference between volume and intensity. And so welcome back, Coach Josh here, Coach Sam, Coach Millie, CrossFit Metro East. And this is part of our series of teaching you a little bit about the why behind the way we do things at CrossFit Metro East. And the topic of volume and intensity really came about because CrossFit's really deemed this high intensity, exercise program, right? Well, we believe that there are some certain rules to intensity as well as, kind of the do's and don'ts of that. But what we really kind of want to dive in today is like understanding the difference between what volume is, what intensity is. So, Coach, maybe let's just start with what is volume?
Volume is just literally how much you're doing. It is quantity.
Yes.
If we want to do the one word definition, quantity.
Quantity. Awesome. And then, so Coach Millie, what's intensity?
How hard you're working, doing the work.
How hard you're doing it. Yeah. That is truly the difference, volume and intensity, as simply put as we can be. Okay. So intensity can be determined by a lot of things, or it can be elevated or decreased in a lot of ways. And this is like probably if you circle back to the conversation we had around scaling and modifications, progressions. We talked about some of that stuff in previous episodes, but intensity really can be determined by load. It can be determined by speed. Complexity of the exercise can change the intensity of a workout. Rest time. This is something that I increase my intensity of workouts a lot, typically because I'm up against the clock on getting a workout in. So what do? I decrease my rest time. It increases my intensity. Not saying that's a good thing.
He asked why this workout hurt.
Why is this workout so hard?
Why does it hurt worse than your notes said?
Yeah.
It's like because you didn't follow the notes.
Right. Yeah. So sometimes I do not follow the notes. More usually it's time constraints and lifestyle constraints that lead to that.
It's rarely an intentional slide.
It is not. Yeah. The other thing was rate of perceived exhaustion. Exertion is something that I put on here. So just the effort in which we're putting into the work, right? So we did a 25-minute mover the other day. I could increase my intensity by how fast or how much effort I was putting into that 25-minute mover, or I could actually take some intensity off by just decreasing my effort. So that idea of RPE was not something we use all the time in here as we're tracking things, but definitely a trackable piece of training.
We use multiple things in here that are adjacent to or similar to RPE. If we think about like our aerobic capacity work, where we use a relative effort to rate how aggressive we need to be, that would be another version of RPE. It's just a kind of a simplified, I'm using words instead of numbers.
Yeah, for sure. So I wanted to touch on the idea of like where this discussion stemmed from, and kind of maybe the classic, we run what we would call probably a modified classic CrossFit model.
At this point, yes.
Yeah, and it's really because we've tailored our programming to fit our client base that we work with, and every gym has a different client base, whether they have a younger population, an older population, a population that's more privy to competition level things, performance, so we kind of have a population that we've tailored a classic CrossFit experience, other than like constantly very functional movement. That's a pretty standard, protocol there. We probably do our strength days a little different. We probably put different movements in that maybe you wouldn't see in a typical CrossFit model, but essentially we run kind of a classic CrossFit model, which we mean is that you really have one workout or one focus for the day.
We're trying to improve X.
Yes. And so what, example of this is that, I started doing CrossFit in 2007, Coach Sam 2010. Yeah, right. Coach Millie 2014.
Yeah, about then.
So I started doing CrossFit following the CrossFit.com workout of the day.
Was there any other option?
There was none. No, nobody was.
At the time, there was
out.
one program that was actually probably one of the best things that have ever happened, regardless of what you think of the programming. To get so many people doing one thing, get you so much data to learn how it needs to evolve. It's kind of, not that we're going to go in this, like that's what the adaptive division right now is really lacking is enough people doing the same thing. Yeah, they just really lack the data to make the decisions. And I think that that's really a big hang up for a lot of people, but they just have to do it. Like I said, it was a really valuable piece of the history.
It really was. And so, but when you did that, you know, 9 o'clock, the workout releases on CrossFit.com, and it would just say deadlift 5-5-5-5. So 5 by 5, essentially.
-3 -1.
Right, right.
For some
There we
reason,
go.
they would always add a 1 at the
Yeah,
end.
hyper 3 have one. But that would be all that was listed. There was no warm up, there was no cool down, that was just the workout, but that was the focus for the day. And so that's what we're talking about when we talk about classic CrossFit. Fran, we mentioned that another 21, 15, 9 thrusters and pull-ups. Just that was it. That was the only thing. That's a classic CrossFit one focus type thing. What happened though is probably around 2011, you'd say. I was trying to think back to this.
That's when everything started.
11 or 12.
Yeah, when CrossFit Games got to the Home Depot Center, got a lot more coverage, got a lot better coverage, and then people were like, oh, okay, I can do something with this. And then we started to see a lot more programs pop up.
Yeah, so, and the programming really became like this kind of strength and Metcon model.
Yeah. Strength, Metcon, repeat.
Right, and it was, so you were doing, you know, a strength movement, whatever else you were doing then, Fran, right? So, hey, we're doing 5 by 5 front squats, and then we're doing Fran, right?
That's how you're gonna get your max intensity, right?
Absolutely, right. I'll talk about that in a second, right? But that was typically pushed by, I feel like it was pushed by either coaches or owners that were competitive based, right? So they were trying to.
Well, the time he was opening gyms up.
Absolutely, all of us.
Like I said, Joshua.
Ex-regionals.
Right, a perfect example.
Yeah.
The people that were opening gyms up were the people that were into the competition because those were the people that were committed. It was still so small. It wasn't seen as this accessible thing.
Yeah.
To the masses yet. It wasn't out there. Like I was that one guy that my friends knew that did CrossFit.
Right.
Back then,
Yeah.
you know, everybody knew someone, and I was
Sure.
that one.
Mhm. Yeah, so it's like that, you know, those early adopters. So that's what we were doing. And so, but we really kind of pushed that competition focus and our personal goals onto our clients. And like, so I'm victim of this. We did this
Oh,
type
absolutely.
of programming
That's what I first
up
started.
until about 2016. It was until about 2016. I went and did my level 2 and got like reinvested into the CrossFit methodology and programming and sat down with level 3 and level 4 coaches that, you know, really, I was like, oh my gosh, we're missing the boat here. And so we made a major shift in our programming, but we were doing this type of programming up to 2016. So let's circle back though, like what are the benefits, or what do you guys feel the benefits are of the classic CrossFit model? And we'll love our model into that as well, because we know that we're doing a lot of that.
Yes, sir.
I mean, a benefit that coming from the old gym where I started at, where they didn't have the model that we have now, they had the, you know, strength and then Metcon. The classic, I think the benefit of one thing is that I felt as a new athlete that I could never really do well on either one. Because if I really gave myself fully to the strength portion to see what I could do, then the Metcon came around and I was like, I suck at this. Or if I'm like, okay, this time, you know, I'm working this out as a new athlete, I'm new to everything. In my head, I'm like, okay, well, tomorrow I'll just reverse it and I won't go as heavy. And then I'll see if I can do better on the Metcon. And at the time, I didn't have a lot of great guidance. I've come to appreciate, obviously, good coaching and what that means on all levels. But I just felt like I sucked at everything.
I mean, it's like the water got really muddy for
I
it.
don't know.
Yeah, but
I
like,
don't know what to do. Am I supposed to go all out on the strength? Am I supposed to go all out on the Metcon?
yeah, and
Because I'm not I'm not a competitive athlete, so I feel like I can't do both. And then if I tried to do both, then I sucked at both of them.
Right.
And I didn't feel like I was progressing in anything.
Mhm.
we're going, yeah, exactly. Do you want to have, half measure on both, a half
Right,
measure on
so
one?
just from a personal note that there wasn't a main focus, and the waters got really muddy for me as a new athlete.
Yeah, well, and it sounds to me like you probably missed the intensity intent for the day, or the intensity goal for the day, because the volume that you were doing was trumping the intensity that you were able to distribute. No matter if you gave it your all to the back squats and then didn't have anything left for the Metcon, or you gave a little less on the back squats and didn't have anything else or you had
You still didn't have
a
quite,
little
you
left.
didn't have as much as you
Right,
wanted.
yeah, so, you know, because there wasn't a main focus, And the other thing too is like, then you didn't really have an opportunity to really focus and improve on any one thing, which leads us to our next thing, coach.
So
What
that's
is that?
I'm saying. It's
What does
like,
that keep you from doing?
again, I lost progress in this model. At first, obviously, I crushed it out of the box. I was a 19-year-old kid getting ready to go special operations.
Yeah.
Think of whatever euphemism you've ever heard for that. I probably embodied it at some level. Like I was ready to train 3 hours a day, yada, yada, yada. But the reality is, in my mid-20s, now, I mean, I was injured, but but after I corrected this, still with the injury, I then still hit PRs. I had like a 2-year plateau on a back squat running this model.
Yeah,
Like I didn't PR for a couple of years
Sure.
training it the whole time. The time to develop wasn't there. I didn't get coached on it.
yeah,
I might have gotten corrected on it, but I never got coached on it.
right.
It was never broken down. There was never like, again, so actually it really stalled out a lot of my progress. Looking back at it, like when I was doing it, I was like, hell yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah,
This is
you weren't,
fun.
you weren't.
Yeah,
none the wiser
I didn't
and-
know better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and so like, to me, you mentioned something about the back squat, like you got corrected on things, but you weren't coached on it. And that's something that we found right away is that,
That was what I remember you coming back from your level 2. You're like, guys, you are doing no coaching.
right, you're managing an hour.
Now, I was secretly sitting there like,
What do you mean?
No. So I knew this. I just didn't know how to bring it to the table. Be like,
Yeah, sure.
hey, I'm tired of just managing a clock the
Right.
whole time. I don't feel like I'm helping people.
Yeah,
the way
that's
that I can.
absolutely what we were doing.
And yeah, so whenever you got all that to get in, the coach's number 1 priority has to be the clock. It has to be logistics.
Yep.
It can't be the experience. It can't be coaching. Unless you're going to run 60-minute classes with 30-minute gaps in between.
Yeah, because you're gonna run over.
Because you're going to run over.
Yeah,
And, especially me early on being the word vomit king, this was tough. Like I know that about myself and I
you're
knew
just
that.
passionate, man. It's not
Well,
word vomit. It's just
but I
passion.
wanted to give all the information. I hadn't learned how to simplify everything yet. And, but yeah, like you said, I knew right away, as soon as you said, I was like, yep.
Yeah.
It's time to coach. Everybody's got to up their game. I was actually really excited about it because I was like, I get to get into the details that I enjoy.
Right. Well, it really allowed us to coach people. It allowed us to improve our clients' experience because we were really able to dive more into specific topics. We were able to coach each individual on those topics rather than if you have a class of 10 people and you've got a 20-minute AMRAP coming up after the 20-minute strength session you have to do, like there's just warm up, cool down.
No, actually, we never did workouts longer than 12 minutes. Everybody loved conditioning.
Well, that's true. Yeah,
We didn't have time for it.
Yeah.
You didn't have time.
Yeah.
You didn't have time to get into very.
Yeah.
Why
and
didn't nobody ever roll 5K?
And it did, it isolated our programming and everything else. So it allowed our coaches to coach. The other thing for me is, and I think like, coach, you touched on a little bit of hitting that plateau, or the one thing about a classic CrossFit medal that I've always appreciated is that I've always had this experience with like, somebody wants to go do a marathon and they're like, hey, I want to go do a marathon. I'm like, cool. And then like 6 months later, they're hurt, they have an overuse injury, they have a stress fracture or whatever else. Like, and I'm like, hey, how'd that marathon go? They're like, oh man, I finished. But man, I limped across the finish line. And I'm like, oh man, like, yeah, well, I was just so broke down from my training because they were running 6 days a week. And maybe they were doing strength training or maybe they weren't, but heaven forbid they were doing strength training and now you got 8 workouts or 10 workouts a week.
Right.
But what was happening was most of us are not equipped for volume. Like we're not built for that type of volume. And so we're not strength athletes.
Not
We're not,
intensity.
yeah, we're not Olympic. Yeah, exactly.
Well, like,
You know?
like the human model, the human being is built for really low intensity for a really long time. That was the first way the humans were able to hunt.
Sure. Yep.
That they would tire animals out by following them.
Correct. Yeah. And so, but again, most of our bodies just aren't built for that. So what ends up happening is we wind up overtraining because we're not prepared for volume. Or we wind up getting hurt and that's what leads from, too much volume. Now you can get hurt. Millie, after you get done with your 5x5 back squats and you go to do this Metcon now you're doing that Metcon under fatigue. Guess what? How much easier it is for you to get hurt in the Metcon because now when does our body get hurt? Typically when it gets out of position. When does it get out of position? Typically when it's tired. Yeah. So like, that's the biggest thing that I've seen as well with that model is that it's decreased somebody's, risk for injury.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is you only have so many bullets to shoot for the day.
Yeah.
And the recovery aspect, if you're doing so much that you don't recover, are you really making progress?
Right,
Because
right.
I mean, at the end of the day, If you
Yeah.
can't recover from what you're doing, you aren't making any progress.
No.
Correct, yeah.
No, I mean, that's where I was, like I said, I mean, for reference here, for anybody listening that's got experience with like younger athletes, I was, early 20s, I was stuck at a 375 back squat. Like for a couple of years, I could squat 375, but not 385.
Right.
And that went on for a couple of years, tried different cycles, did a Smolov Junior.
Oh, yeah.
Added that in on top of my program.
That's not a lot of volume.
No, not at all. It's only 4 days a week. And I ended up going on to squat 500.
Yeah. But not on
I
that.
had to adjust but again, it was the lack of coaching. I wasn't putting myself, I needed to put myself in a position for that. I don't not take ownership for that, but it was me not getting coached and then not being given reasonable volume and progression. And that's why, like I said, I went on to squat 500.
Yeah.
But that was years and years later, whenever I cleaned up these strategy issues, which is really what it was. My issue wasn't my ability to squat, it was my strategy about it.
Yeah. Now, I want to say, like, we're not saying that volume, for volume's sake is bad, right? So there are instances.
I think that's what we are saying.
Well, yeah, volume,
Volume-
sorry,
volume-
that is actually bad.
Volume for volume's sake is the issue.
Yes,
Volume, any volume can be built up to through, but
yes,
again, if we want to do it and really take care of our people, it has to be done with progressions.
yes.
A lot of people are really enjoying the little phase of programming we're in right now. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. It's like, yes, because for the last 2 months, it's been a lot of progressions to build into this.
Build up, yeah.
And you guys have been put in a position to own this.
Yeah.
And now you guys get to use all these physical skills and express them in a cool way because of the way we brought it together.
Well, and I think there's just certain pieces where we believe that there is benefits of having volume in certain aspects, and certain movements that we do, and then there's also pieces where it's like, no, we were joking about, like, you're never really going to need to lift 17 cars in an issue. It's probably going to be one. If you have 17, there's a bigger problem than you probably created. I think that's what you said.
Yeah, it's probably your fault at this point.
So,
Not very altruistic.
but there are things that we do need to gain volume and capacity on in certain things. But so where would you say, like, where does volume have its place in training with intention?
Yeah. Just always assume that we're gonna take care of our athletes the best possible. It's goal dependent. Like again, somebody who wants to run a really long race, or not saying that somebody should do 5 powerlifting competitions in 2 months. But let's just say that they're going to, and maybe they're raising money, this, that, and the other. Like, it's got to come with a lot of considerations, obviously, but like goal dependent. And again, it's got to be built up to and progress. But like, again, as long as it's not for the sake of, like, I never put in a long workout and just because, like, we need a long workout.
I just would like to crush everybody's soul. Yeah.
That's
why
Why
you
do
programs-
people think that?
That's why
That's not
Sam
what-
programs and not me, because I do have those thoughts sometimes. They're like, I just feel like crushing these people's souls.
I just get
Yeah.
accused. I just get accused, like, hey, I am doing all right.
Yeah. Right. So one thing, like, so strength cycles, like if I'm doing a strength cycle and I'm on a specific, and we talked about this, we do strength cycles with the intent to compete or to perform at a certain
Yes.
point, right? There is volume that needs to accumulate over that time, but it accumulates within cycles and it's structured, right? And our clients will typically see a little bit more volume on strength days.
I
We
think so.
typically put that in because with accessory exercise, there's still one main focus. We piece in accessory exercise. We got another episode coming up to talk about accessory exercises, why that's important, right? But that will typically be more volume than conditioning days. But it's intentional because there's strength pieces and components to that. I would say that volume needs to be structurally input with competitive CrossFit athletes or athletic competition type program.
Yeah, when we get into competition, volume is a domain.
Yes.
Volume is a domain, the same as strength at that point, or I guess the word that we may use would be capacity.
Yes.
Well, like you have, like, part of the competition demand is you can apply intensity 4 separate times in a day for some,
Correct.
3 separate times.
Yep.
And like you said, that's a whole set of skills.
Yes.
But yeah, so no, absolutely, to be a competitive athlete, not just like, oh, I'm gonna do one here and there with my friend because it's fun. No, yeah, it is a domain of your training. It is the 11th general skill you have to have.
but I think what's important too is that people, this isn't just arbitrarily in your training, it is cycled as well in certain seasons.
Again, if you're smart,
If you peel back the curtain on client, like on true competitive programming, and I'm going to touch on this in a second, some components of what I believe is important there if you are doing volume training, but like it's cycled, just like strength cycles. There are certain seasons that you do increase volume. There's also certain seasons, much like kind of right now, which I would say that most of the competitive world is barely having an off season, but typically their volume goes down during their post-season type
That's why
phase
you
that they're in after the game.
why you don't see the best performances at Wadapalooza.
Right, because they're not in that phase of their
All those athletes are just going, hey, this is the one fun competition I get to do. And for some reason, they're offering 6 figures now.
Right. So anyways, volume can be there, right? And it's okay. Coach Millie, what would you say, like, what are some key markers to aid in handling volume? Like what would be like and I think you touched on it a little bit ago when we talked.
Well, I mean, when I think about recovery and then the things underneath recovery, that's your nutrition, your sleep, to a certain extent what supplements you're taking, but you should be eating well enough. That's just a
Absolutely.
little,
That should be considered part of
Sidebar.
your nutrition. Personally,
Yeah.
I don't consider supplementation and nutrition different.
No, yeah, it's
yeah,
that
it
part
should
of that.
be,
Yeah.
and then, whatever you need to do to take care of your body, like through massage or, chiropractic care, things
Right,
like
manual
that.
care, what,
Right. But definitely nutrition and sleep are probably at the top.
And that's what I think becomes the biggest problem there is that we might have clients, and I'm not saying we have current clients right now, they're doing this, but say, I've worked with clients in the past that want the volume, but they don't want to do the things that are demanded of that volume, which is proper sleep, proper nutrition, proper care on your body with medical professionals that can
Right.
keep you moving forward. And so that's one of the biggest things. It's all about recovery. Yeah.
One more, it would be continuing to apply the intended intensity.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's the other big pitfall that people fall into. They sacrifice their intensity for the sake of doing more. And at that point, we are truly choosing quantity over quality.
Yeah. And then,
That's what it is. Intensity is quality if we're going to call volume quantity.
no, absolutely. And the other thing I would say is really smart programming, right? Like, so, and what I mean by that, there's so much access to programming now. So many of, pieces of the puzzle that you can get on and buy an online program. You can do, ID, which is individual design, whatever else. You can join a gym's programming, but you're doing it from home or whatever else. You can do group programming, but what I find is competitive programming to maintain volume, to actually do volume stuff at a high level, it's got to be really smart programming. I believe it's almost always with a coach, and I highly recommend it personally.
It's infrequent that it's not, that it shouldn't be with a coach. I mean, I consider myself to be pretty capable of taking care of myself. And when's the last time I didn't have a coach? I didn't
Work with a coach.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like one of the ways that I will like add volume, if somebody wants to go competitive, like, all right, so one of the ways we're gonna add volume is they're gonna do their normal training. And then we're gonna add like sleds. It starts off with adding sled drag volume.
Yeah.
A few days a week. And then as they start feeling good with that, they start telling me like, I'm getting more comfortable dragging the sled. Let's just say I'm starting off with 3 sled drags. Two of those, we're gonna pull one off. The other 2 are gonna get a little longer. And then that one that I'm pulling off is gonna then get replaced with a really simple metcon. And we're gonna, again, and then now.
Time under tension.
And time under tension, and now we're producing a progression, a model to keep working off and markers like, hey, when you get comfortable with this, we will move forward.
Yeah.
And we won't until then. And so, but on top of that is I put them in a position to be successful with their intensity. A sled drag is one of the most recoverable exercises in terms of like the return you get on it, but like how much extra recovery it's going to demand. It's a lot less because there's no eccentric loading.
Yeah.
It doesn't particularly stress joints, so it's low impact.
Yep.
So we give them very recoverable volume as addition. And as they get very good at that, we get more challenging recovery. And then we learn what is your sweet spot.
Right.
We go to the competition, we evaluate, we do it again.
Yeah, I think that's great. And again, it's when we increase volume, we're really increasing time and attention on the body. And that's really good insight on how you do that. So to kind of wrap up, you guys, intensity versus volume, intensity, the quantity, I'm sorry, the effort at which we work or how hard we're working, okay, but intensity is also intent, right? So what I would say is like, if you have so much volume where you're missing intent, then that means that you have trumped intensity for volume. And as Coach said, if you trump intensity, then you also trump quality of training. And so getting the most out of your training there. But then also understanding that volume can be done. It needs to be appropriately loaded and cycled. And it typically probably should just be done with a coach on a personal level so that you do it,
At minimum, you got somebody to bounce ideas off of.
Yeah.
Like you got somebody to talk to about exactly what's going on that is invested in your success.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hey guys, thanks again for hanging out with us today. Again, talking about volume and intensity. I think this is episode 5 in our podcast. I think we have one additional video maybe in there that's number 6, but it's the missing episode on the podcast, I think. But we changed up our setting today. Hopefully it wasn't awful. The lighting's better, and we're not so confined in one room. So one day we'll be super professional about how we do
the weather
things.
is better for the.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not 95 outside, so we'll get outside the room.
Right, yeah. So anyways, guys, on this page or underneath this episode, you'll see a link there. If you have any questions, you can always hit us up on social media. You can email us info@crossfit-metroeast.com. You can hit a start now button on our website or follow the link in the podcast notes there to book a no sweat intro. If you have any interest in checking out more about our gym, we'd love to learn about how we can help you. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great rest of your day. See you.